For over 20 years, Jack Reynolds had been the backbone of the entire tech infrastructure at Nordberg Solutions, a company that started as a small software firm and had grown into one of the top players in the industry. Jack had designed their system architecture from the ground up, patching up every gap, upgrading as technology advanced, and making sure everything ran smoothly, even when the company had no idea how much they relied on him. When the CEO, Richard Myers, called Jack into his office one Monday morning, Jack assumed it was just another routine meeting, but the words that followed hit him like a ton of bricks. "Jack," Richard started, his voice cool, "we've decided to let you go. The company can no longer afford your salary. We can hire 3 younger engineers for what you're making. It's just business." Jack blinked, processing what he just heard. He'd been the one to keep the company's entire IT infrastructure working smoothly, solving problems they didn't even know existed, and now he was being let go because he cost too much. It didn't make sense. For a moment, his mind flashed back to the late nights spent coding, the countless hours he put into ensuring everything worked perfectly for Nordberg. And now it felt like they were discarding him like an old tool, no longer needed. "Richard," Jack said calmly, "I built this company's entire system from the ground up. Without me, you wouldn't even have the backbone to handle the business you're running now." He could feel his frustration growing, but he kept his voice even. "Are you sure this is the right call?" Richard's response was matter-of-fact, almost dismissive. "It's not personal, Jack. This is just about cutting costs. The new team will handle things just fine." Jack didn't argue. He wasn't going to beg for his job. He had put in his time, and he knew his worth. As he walked out of the office, he grabbed his things, his entire career of achievements folded into a single box. His hands were steady, but inside, something was beginning to shift. He didn't feel angry. He felt done. Done with a company that had relied on him for so long, but now decided he was expendable. As Jack cleared out his desk, he couldn't help but think of the irony. They were pushing him out because they thought they could replace him with cheaper options, but they had no idea what they were about to lose. Jack wasn't just a cog in the machine. He was the one who had built the machine. He walked to his car, his phone buzzing in his pocket. He glanced at the screen. It was a message from Brian, one of the engineers who had been with the company for a few years. "Jack, the whole server farm is down. They're already calling you. You need to fix this. They don't know how to handle it." Jack didn't respond. He knew what was coming. They couldn't handle it without him, and now they were going to have to face the consequences. He slid into his truck, started the engine, and pulled out of the parking lot. As he drove away from the building, the sun was setting, casting a fiery glow across the horizon. Jack knew that this was only the beginning. His phone buzzed again, but this time he ignored it. They had made their decision. Now they would see just how much they needed him. As Jack drove, the city skyline slowly receded in his rearview mirror, and he felt a strange mix of calm and frustration. He wasn't angry, not really. He had long stopped expecting loyalty from corporate culture. After all, he'd seen it all before. Companies constantly restructuring, shedding employees like dead weight, all in the name of cost-cutting. Jack had been through downsizing before, but this felt different. He had been a pillar at Nordberg for so long, and yet here he was, shoved aside like his years of hard work meant nothing. He pulled into his driveway and turned off the engine, staring at the house that had been his home for the last decade. It was a modest place, nothing flashy, just a comfortable 2-story with a small yard and a view of the lake down the street. He sat in the truck for a while, hands resting on the steering wheel, his mind running in circles. What was next? How could they just cut him loose like that, without any real understanding of the mess they were about to create? Jack had always considered himself a problem solver, but now, for the first time in years, he felt powerless. The job he had poured his heart and soul into was gone, and with it, the sense of purpose he had carried for so long. He looked at the phone in his hand, still buzzing with notifications, but he didn't open them. It was the same old story, wasn't it? People asking for favors, asking for his expertise, asking for him to come back and clean up their mess. They didn't even know the half of it. And now they were going to learn just how deep the hole they had dug really was. He walked into the house and kicked off his shoes, heading straight for the kitchen. The room smelled faintly of coffee from earlier that morning, but he didn't feel like drinking any now. Instead, he poured himself a glass of whiskey and sat down on the porch, looking out at the lake as the sun sank lower in the sky. His wife, Nora, had already gone to bed. It was late, but Jack couldn't shake the feeling that his life had just shifted into a different gear. He'd spent so many years with Nordberg, helping it grow, building systems that were now in place across the entire industry, and yet they were ready to throw it all away for a few extra bucks. They didn't understand what he had built. The company was big now, too big for its own good. Over the years, Jack had watched as the company grew, bringing in new executives who didn't understand the complexity of the systems he had created. They had been focused on expansion, on numbers, on revenue. But they were missing the one thing that kept everything running smoothly: experience. Jack's experience. The custom-coded solutions he had built from scratch were now the heart of the company, yet all they cared about was cutting costs. It had been a gradual shift, a slow fade from respect to indifference, and now it had culminated in this. Jack finished his drink and leaned back in his chair, his thoughts turning inward. Was this how it ended? After all those years of dedication, after the countless hours spent solving problems, creating systems, and fixing things before they broke? Was he really just a casualty of the corporate machine, discarded when he was no longer convenient? The thought stung, but he had long since stopped expecting the world to hand out rewards for hard work. He knew better. Companies didn't care about the people who made them successful. They only cared about the bottom line. But that didn't mean Jack was ready to roll over and accept defeat. No, there had to be more to this story. He wasn't going to let them win. Not like this. He had built everything they were now depending on, and they didn't even realize how much they were about to lose. Maybe it was time to let them feel the consequences of their actions. Maybe it was time for them to realize just how much Jack Reynolds had truly meant to Nordberg Solutions. He set the empty glass down on the table and pulled out his phone, staring at the messages that had been piling up all evening. The texts from his colleagues at Nordberg were becoming more desperate, but Jack wasn't ready to respond. Not yet. He needed to think. He had made a living solving problems, but this time, the problem wasn't just about fixing a piece of code or troubleshooting a system error. This was personal. He needed to decide what he was going to do next. The calls were going to keep coming. They had already started. Jack knew they needed him more than ever. The phone buzzed again, interrupting his thoughts. It was a message from Brian, the lead developer at Nordberg, and it was followed by a voicemail. Jack pressed play, his thumb hovering over the screen. "Jack, it's Brian. The system's down. We've been trying to troubleshoot all night, but it's a mess. We've lost access to most of the databases and nothing's processing properly. We need your help, man. The team is freaking out here, and I know you're the only one who understands how all of this works. Please, give us a call back." Jack listened to the desperation in Brian's voice, but it didn't sway him. He had already made his decision. If Nordberg thought they could replace him with younger, cheaper engineers, then they could learn the hard way what happens when you let someone like Jack go. He didn't respond to the voicemail. Instead, he put the phone down, stood up from his chair, and walked into the house. The silence inside the house felt heavy. He could hear the faint hum of the refrigerator in the kitchen, but that was all. Nora was still asleep, and Jack wasn't sure if he could sleep just yet. He paced around for a while, trying to work through everything in his head. He had years of experience, years of knowledge that no one else in the company had, and now they were going to have to deal with the mess they had created. As the night wore on, Jack made up his mind. He wasn't going to let them off the hook. They didn't deserve his help. Not now, not after the way they had treated him. He needed to take a stand, and the only way to do that was to show them exactly how much they needed him. The next morning, Jack woke up early, the cool morning air from the lake seeping through the windows. He made himself a cup of coffee and sat down at the kitchen table, staring at his phone. The notifications were still coming in from Nordberg. The messages were more urgent now. He could almost feel their panic through the screen. But Jack wasn't ready to go back. Not yet. He stared at the phone for a moment, then deleted all the messages. They had pushed him out, and now they were going to have to deal with the consequences. If they wanted to fix what they had broken, they'd have to do it without him. Jack smiled to himself, a quiet sense of satisfaction settling in. They hadn't just lost an employee, they had lost everything Jack had built. The phone buzzed again. Jack picked it up, and this time he saw the name flashing across the screen. Richard Myers, the CEO of Nordberg Solutions. Jack hesitated for a moment, then answered. "Jack," Richard's voice crackled through the speaker, "we've got a situation. We need your help. The system is down, and we're losing clients. Please, we need you." Jack leaned back in his chair, staring at the phone. He could hear the desperation in Richard's voice, but he wasn't ready to give in. Not yet. Instead, he took a deep breath, deciding how he would respond. This wasn't just about the money anymore, it was about proving a point. "Richard," Jack said, his voice calm and steady, "I'm afraid you're going to have to figure this one out on your own." He paused, letting the words sink in. "You made your decision. Now you'll see the consequences." He hung up the phone. Jack set the phone down with a sense of finality, but his heart wasn't racing. No, instead, there was a strange calm in his chest. He'd just done something he hadn't done in years. He'd refused to help, and it felt right. The phone call, as desperate as it had sounded, wasn't his responsibility anymore. They had made their bed, and now they were going to have to lie in it. Still, as the seconds stretched into minutes, Jack's mind wandered. A long career, an entire lifetime's work reduced to a single phone call. Was that how it ended? Just like that? They hadn't even appreciated the work he'd done, the systems he'd designed, the countless sleepless nights. Instead, they had tossed him aside as if his experience and dedication didn't matter. What did it matter in the end? They didn't even know what was at stake. They didn't understand the intricacies of the system, the way each line of code interacted with the next. They didn't know that if they messed up, the whole thing could come crashing down. Jack thought back to the days when the company was smaller, when he was in the trenches with the early team, building the infrastructure from the ground up. Those were simpler times when the vision for Nordberg Solutions wasn't driven by quarterly earnings and profit margins, but by creating something solid, something reliable. Back then, there was a sense of pride in the work, a genuine desire to make the company thrive. Jack had been proud to be a part of it all, to watch it grow and to know that he had helped build something lasting. But now everything had changed. The company had expanded so quickly, bringing in all these new faces with shiny MBAs and impressive resumes. They didn't care about the foundation that Jack had laid. They cared about numbers, about cutting costs, about pushing aside the people who had helped them get where they were. They thought they could just replace Jack, that they could hire younger, cheaper engineers to handle everything. They didn't realize that experience wasn't something you could just buy. Jack stood up from the kitchen table, walked over to the window, and stared out at the still water of the lake. The world felt different now. The air, the landscape, everything seemed untouched by the turmoil inside his head. He could almost hear the sound of the wind rustling the trees, and for a moment he wondered if he had made the right choice. But no, he was sure of it. They had made their decision, and now they were paying the price. They thought they could handle the mess without him. Let them try. Jack had spent his career fixing things, building things that worked, but they were about to learn that not everything was as easy as flipping a switch. He grabbed his coat from the hook by the door and stepped outside, the cool morning air biting at his skin. He didn't have anywhere specific to go, just out for a walk, really. He needed to clear his head. As he walked down the street, he passed the neighbors' houses, all quiet and still in the early morning hours. The rhythmic sound of his boots on the pavement was the only noise in the air. Jack let his thoughts drift. The phone buzzed again, interrupting the peace of his walk. He took it out of his pocket but didn't recognize the number. For a moment he hesitated, but then he answered anyway. "Jack?" The voice on the other end was strained. "This is Brian. I know you're not picking up the other calls, but you have to understand. We're at a breaking point. We're losing clients by the hour. Richard's on the edge, man. Please, we need you to come back and help. Just for a little while. You know the system better than anyone. We can't fix this without you." Jack stopped walking. He could hear the desperation in Brian's voice. The pressure, the panic, it was all there. But Jack wasn't swayed. He had spent years being the go-to guy, the one they called when everything fell apart. And now, when they'd let him go, they expected him to come back and save the day. "I'm sorry, Brian," Jack said, his voice calm and firm. "I told Richard earlier, I'm not coming back. You all made a decision, and now you'll have to live with it." There was a long pause on the other end of the line before Brian spoke again, his voice quieter now. "I understand, but it's bad, Jack. Worse than you think. We might lose everything. You might lose everything, too." Jack felt a pang in his chest. He didn't want to hear that. He didn't want to think about the ripple effect his departure might have. But deep down, he knew. He knew what was coming. If Nordberg Systems went down permanently, it would be catastrophic, not just for the company, but for everyone involved. The reputation they had spent years building would be gone. Clients would jump ship. Competitors would swoop in. But it wasn't Jack's problem anymore. It couldn't be. He had spent his entire career putting out fires, but now it was time for someone else to deal with the blaze. The more he thought about it, the clearer it became. They hadn't respected him. They hadn't valued his experience, and now they were going to see the cost of their mistake. "I've made my decision, Brian," Jack said, cutting through the silence. "I'm not coming back, and I'm not the one to save you now. You need to fix this without me." Jack hung up the phone and stood there for a moment, letting the weight of the situation settle over him. The company was unraveling, and it was only a matter of time before the full scope of their failure became clear. He could already imagine the fallout, the calls from clients demanding answers, the board meetings filled with panic and finger-pointing. And in the middle of it all, Nordberg would be without him, the one person who could have prevented this disaster, the one person who knew the systems inside and out. But they had let him go, and now it was too late. Jack took a deep breath and started walking again, his mind made up. There was nothing more to do here. He had his own life to rebuild, his own future to focus on. The morning passed quickly as Jack walked, lost in his thoughts. He ended up in a small park by the lake, a place he used to visit when he wanted to think. He sat down on a bench, staring out at the water, his mind racing. He had a lot to consider, and yet everything felt oddly clear. He wasn't going to help them, not now, not after everything they had done. But what next? Where did he go from here? The phone buzzed again. This time the number was unfamiliar, but something about it made Jack pause. He picked up the phone and answered. Jack, this is Lawrence Devlin with Devlin Systems. I heard about your situation. I know you're going through a lot right now, but I wanted to talk to you about an opportunity, a real one. I've been following your work for years, and we're looking to bring in someone with your expertise. Let's talk. Jack felt a flicker of curiosity. Jack sat up straighter on the bench, the wind picking up slightly, rustling the leaves on the trees around him. Lawrence Devlin, the name was familiar. Devlin Systems was a growing competitor in the tech space, and they had been making waves in the industry. Jack had heard of them, but he had never really considered making a move. Now, hearing Lawrence's voice on the other end of the line, a small spark of interest flickered in his chest. "Lawrence," Jack said, his voice steady but curious. "What's this about?" "Jack, I know things are messy right now with Nordberg, and I don't want to add to the stress," Lawrence began, his tone respectful but purposeful. "But I've been following your work for years. The systems you built at Nordberg, no one else has done anything like it. We've been trying to build something similar, but it's clear we're not getting there as fast as we'd like. What we need is someone who understands how to create something lasting, not just flashy new technology that crashes when it's put to the test." Jack's heart beat a little faster as he listened. It wasn't about the money. He had no intention of simply jumping into the first offer that came his way. But Lawrence's words struck a chord with him. A lasting system. Something that worked the first time, not just a patchwork solution to problems no one wanted to deal with. Jack had spent his entire career building that kind of infrastructure. "I'm listening," Jack replied, leaning back on the bench, taking a deep breath as he processed what was being offered. "We're looking for someone to lead our systems architecture division, someone who understands the intricacies of legacy systems and can create something that scales. That's reliable. We've got the funding and we've got the vision. But what we don't have is your experience, Jack. You're the best at what you do, and we need that kind of expertise." Jack's mind was racing now. He had always prided himself on the work he did, on the systems he created. The offer wasn't just a job. It was an opportunity to build something the right way, to do things properly from the start. And this time, he wouldn't have to fight against executives who cared only about numbers and short-term gains. It was tempting, so much more tempting than he had expected. "What's the catch?" Jack asked, always the skeptic. Lawrence laughed lightly, sensing Jack's hesitation. "No catch. We want to do it right, and we know that starts with you. We're offering you a position to build our systems from the ground up. Full autonomy. You'd have the resources to create what you know is possible, without the pressure of corporate red tape holding you back." Jack thought for a moment. The idea of working in a place where his experience and knowledge would be truly valued was appealing. He had spent years at Nordberg, where his work was always a means to an end, never truly appreciated for what it was. But with Devlin, perhaps it could be different. Perhaps he could finally build something that would last, without the distractions of budget cuts and inexperienced executives who didn't understand the value of a well-designed system. "I think I'm interested," Jack said after a long pause. "But I need to know more. I need to know that this isn't just another startup trying to reinvent the wheel without understanding how to maintain it." "I understand completely," Lawrence said. "How about we meet in person? I can fly you out tomorrow if you're available. We'll go over the vision, the resources we have in place, and the role we'd like you to take. I want you to feel confident that this is the right move for you." Jack's mind was made up. It wasn't about the money. It wasn't about proving anything to anyone anymore. It was about building something solid, something real, something that would stand the test of time. "Okay," Jack said, the decision settling in. "Let's meet." The call ended, and Jack sat in silence for a moment, letting the weight of the conversation sink in. For the first time in a long while, he felt something akin to excitement, something he hadn't felt since the early days at Nordberg, when he was still part of the team, still in the thick of it. The possibility of starting over, of doing things right this time, was a feeling he hadn't realized he had been craving. The phone buzzed again, and Jack glanced down to see a text from Brian. "Jack, please, just one more time, come back and help us. We're sinking. You're the only one who can fix this." Jack sighed and put the phone back in his pocket. He wasn't going to help them. He had made his decision. A few weeks later, Jack found himself sitting in a modern office building in downtown San Francisco across from Lawrence Devlin. The conversation had gone well, and by the end of their meeting, Jack had signed a contract. Devlin Systems was offering him everything he had ever wanted: autonomy, respect, and the opportunity to build something from scratch. But more than that, they understood the value of what Jack could bring to the table. They knew that it wasn't just about flashy innovations. It was about building systems that would last, systems that people could depend on. As Jack boarded the plane back home, he couldn't help but smile. This was the beginning of something new, a fresh start far away from the corporate games and short-term thinking of Nordberg. He had moved on, not just from the company, but from a way of working that had drained him for too long. Jack was going to build something better this time, something that would last, something that would prove once and for all that experience, hard work, and dedication were worth more than any cost-cutting measure could ever hope to achieve. When he landed, his phone buzzed again. This time it was a simple message from Brian. They fired Richard. The system's down worse than ever. What are you going to do? Jack smiled to himself as he typed a quick reply. "I'm building something better. You'll see." And with that, he turned off his phone, ready to focus on the future. His future. And for the first time in a long time, Jack was finally looking forward to it. Have you ever faced a situation where your boss made an unfair decision about you or your work? How did you handle it, and what did you learn from that experience?